Hey, what's up? What's up? Good morning, afternoon, or evening, good people, wherever you are, wherever you happen to be, and however we're together. Thank you for being here. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head. So, what's in my head? So, the first thing I have to talk about is obviously the just tragedy, the tragedy in Texas. Um, I feel like every couple days, maybe every week or so, we have this situation where we have a mass shooting that kills innocent people. Thoughts and prayers go out. People bitch and moan about gun rights and gun protections, and it's just this cyclical thing that is uniquely horrible to America that nobody seems to want to have the balls to do anything about. And we just reach this point over and over and over and over again. And there are more people who die terrible, heartless, just sad deaths unnecessarily because some guy, usually a guy, gets a hold of a weapon of war that's intended to do and inflict as much damage as possible to the human body. They sometimes targeted, sometimes racial, sometimes religious, sometimes ideology, attack people, but innocent people, with no regard. And many times just attack people just because they're pissed off. They're pissed off because somebody told them that this group of people or that group of people or America in general or everybody is responsible for their place in life. And so they go out and they attack these innocent people, leave families torn to shreds, literally, mourning their loss. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Families just going out for a trip to the mall in Texas. An entire family minus one son slaughtered. It's just sad. And it makes no sense to me. It makes absolute no sense to me. I've seen someone die tragically in front of me before. I have. And it's just not a pretty sight. It's not something I ever want to see again at all. Nothing I ever hope to bear witness to. I've seen someone lose their life due to sickness, illness in front of me before. Not something I want to see again. But time and time again, this type of tragedy occurs uniquely in this country. I don't care what political side you sit on. You cannot deny the fact that this is a uniquely American problem. When's the last time you heard of a mass shooting in France, Australia, China, Canada? When? And when have you had or heard situations where after a mass shooting, a group of people vehemently defend the rights of people, including the person who slaughtered someone? Because whether they tried to or not, whether they intend to or not, whether they state it bluntly or not, they're also defending the right of that person who murdered X number of people to have that weapon in their possession because of the Second Amendment. And the bodies aren't even cool yet. The blood isn't even cleaned off the ground yet. And there are already people out there talking heads defending the murderer's right to have a weapon. And it continues. I believe yesterday in Philly, someone who was, political campaign canvassing, they used to call it. I don't know if they call it that anymore. But handing out flyers in the neighborhood. Somehow an argument ensued. And I admit I don't know the details of it, but I do know the intent of the person being out there was to canvass and put flyers out for some campaign. Something happened where an argument ensued, and somebody pulled out a gun and shot him dead. My biggest problem with this is, why does the gun always have to be the first choice? I grew up a time, and I say this all the time, the 90s aren't here anymore. We can talk about the glory of the 90s when we talk about music. We can talk about the glory of the 90s when we talk about being able to go to school and not worry about it getting shot up. The glory of the 80s and 90s was that if we had a disagreement, we fought. Fists. I know that's not familiar to a lot of people out there, but fists. We fought. One person won, the other person lost. Or maybe it's just a draw. Maybe y'all just got some good shots in, nobody went down, nobody got their ass whooped. It's a draw. Maybe it happened just once. You shook hands, said, you know what, we squashed it. Maybe it happened 2, 3, 4, or 5 times. Where we used to call back in the day, we didn't call it back in the day then, but we call it that now, on site. That's what on site was back in the day. We fought one time. Next time I saw you, fought again. Time after that, we fought again. And then at some point, we got to the point where we said, you know what, this is dumb. We shook hands, squashed it, and moved on with life. And guess what? We were able to move on with life because nobody pulled out a gun like a coward and shot somebody just for a disagreement. Now, it's not to say we lived in a world devoid of gun violence in the 80s and 90s, because it's not true. The innocent was protected back then. The small, minute disagreement or argument didn't result in gun violence every time. But add to the list things you can't do in America without getting gunned down. Canvassing for a political campaign. You know, the interesting thing about all this, and it's really sad, is that there are 7 countries right now that I can name who've issued travel advisories for the United States because of gun violence and threats of gun violence and dangers of gun violence and the fact that you may go visit and die by random gun violence. New Zealand has issued an advisory. Canada has issued an advisory. Australia, United Kingdom, France, Venezuela, Uruguay. Those 7 countries have issued travel advisories for their citizens if they intend to come to the United States. And I'm sure I can do more research than I've done and come up with more countries that have done that. If I lived abroad and decided I wanted to come home to visit family, I'd be a little concerned. Where are we going? What kind of neighborhood is it? Any violence around that area? What's the crime like? Are there a bunch of Trumpers? True story. I would ask that question. Are there a bunch of Trumpers out there? A bunch of white nationalists? A bunch of neo-Nazis in the area? There's so many factions of people, class of people, who potentially could decide one day to pick up a gun and just randomly shoot people. So yeah, if I was visiting the United States, I'd do a ton of research about where I was going to go, when I was going to go there, who I was going to be around, all that. I'd mess around, go golfing and stay in my hotel. Because one thing I can say, you don't see a lot of shootouts on golf courses. True story. Think about it. When's the last time you heard about a mass shooting on a golf course? But it's sad. It's sad that there is a list of things that you can't do in this country because you might get shot down. Going to school, going to a mall, canvassing for a political campaign, going grocery shopping, driving. I mean, how much road rage is going on right now? Going bowling, having a prom party, graduation party. I mean, I can keep going. These are just the things that popped into my head literally right now that I've heard in the last month or so. That's how bad gun violence is and continues to get worse in this country. But all I hear over and over again is we must protect the Second Amendment. Our rights, our guns, our rights, our guns. I really think, and I don't wish this on anybody because that's not who I am, that's not my MO, but I really think one of these prominent politicians has to lose the life of someone they love and care about to gun violence. As tragically as a random mass shooting is, on that level, for them to think about the seriousness that everyday citizens go through. Until then, they're not going to be empathetic and actually try to do change, make change, promote change, legislate change. They're not going to do it. Why would they? You keep electing them. So why would they change anything they do? They haven't suffered loss. So why would they change? I remember years ago, I think his name was Scalia or something like that, the politician that was shot at I think it was a softball game or something like that, that the Dems and Repubs had back. I remember Obama was president. I think he was president. That might have been the only time I remember that the initial coverage and interviews and reactions and statements didn't go right to the Second Amendment because it was one of those legislators, congressmen, senators. It was that fraternity of that level that's in this country where there's us and there's them. I talked about this last episode. There's two different worlds we live in. There's the world of us who face accountability, who get the random murders happening to us because we're just ordinary citizens. And then there's them, the people who have security guards and protection, escorts, and all types of things to protect them, health insurance, all types of things. But asking that you have those same things somehow has turned into socialism, has turned into wanting a handout, has turned into you're trying to take my guns and Second Amendment away. All the simple things that you have in that other world that we just simply want for ourselves are always demonized. But that's the two worlds we live in. Speaking of two worlds, the second thing that's on my mind is something that's been ongoing for a while. And it's, I brought it up a bunch of times. It's the lack of accountability and consequences, again, for those people in that other world that exists in that other class, for a more simplified way to put it. So we talked about Tucker Carlson, who was fired by Fox News probably about a month ago now. And actually today, the date I'm recording, he announced on Twitter that he's going to relaunch his show. Tucker's on Twitter. TT. It works for me. I don't know TT. And of course he talks about all these things about being fired and breach of contract and all this. It's the lingo for I'm gearing up for a lawsuit. I'm going to sue Fox News Corp or whatever the official corporation is called. But of course he's setting up a lawsuit. It's what they do. You do wrong, you get caught, you cause the company who employs you to pay out almost $1 billion in settlement because of things you said and things that people like you who, wanted Trump so bad and didn't care about lying to the people and all that stuff. Proven, by the way, so you can't sue me for defamation. It's kind of part of the settlement that you actually did those things. But of course he's setting up a lawsuit. That's what they do. They do wrong, play the victim, sue, settle, come out better than they were before because now they got their golden parachute and they got their settlement money. They got all these followers who are up in arms and following them now. So they got all this money from advertising and all this other stuff. So Tucker's going to make out way better than he was before if he had stayed on Fox News. But it's the way of the world. It's the way that class of people operate. Now, if my company fired me, even if I did wrong, I get laughed out of courtroom if I try to sue them. They wouldn't think twice about settling with me. But watch and mark my words. He'll sue Fox. They'll settle. He'll get a couple $100 million. Then he'll go on, do whatever he's going to do, make more money. His sheep will follow him. He'll just make more and more money. I'm telling you, he'll be better off than he was before. It's something I should try. Maybe I can make a cool, $500 million that way. And another note, speaking of someone else who's not held accountable for years and years and years, Trump was actually found guilty for sexual abuse and defamation in the case with the woman who claimed these things happened. Somehow, sexual abuse, defamation, but not rape. Which is interesting to me because this all came about because the woman, and I can't remember her name, the woman said that Trump raped her, sexually abused her, and in response, Trump defamed her. Claimed, why would I even date this woman, blah, 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 blah. All this other stuff. So a jury found that he was liable for sexual abuse and liable for defamation, which maybe I'm missing something, but the defamation only comes about because you're saying that you didn't sexually abuse and rape her and that she was lying and crazy and all these other things. So you find him guilty for the sexual abuse. You find him guilty for defaming, aka lying about those things, but not the rape that was alleged. It makes no sense to me. My only conclusion is that, sexual abuse is, even if it's criminally tried, would be some sort of misdemeanor to make a deal for. Whereas rape might be a felony. I'm guessing rape is a felony. And defamation is just money, which he can pull out of the coffers from all those idiots that supported his campaign after the election. Oh, wait, it wasn't a campaign. It was the, what was it called? The Truth campaign or something like that to get the election overthrown. Yeah, that whole thing. He's probably got money left from that stuff. But like I said, last episode I talked about these two worlds. And I don't think there's any better proof that there are two different worlds, especially in the United States. There's the have-nots, the rich, the poor, the upper class, and everybody else. Whatever way you want to put it, that exists. Trump and Tucker Carlson, cheese by the way, which is weird. Trump and Tucker Carlson, are the prime examples of this classism that we have, that exists in this country, that allows the Trumpers to grab women by the pussy, that allows them to sexually abuse somebody, that allows them to defame someone, that allows Tucker Carlson to defame a company, lie to the masses daily, and not spend a single day in jail. And don't let that little indictment in New York fool you. Trump's never going to serve any time. If you believe he's going to serve some time, listen, I got a mountain in the ocean I can tell you. There are mountains in the ocean, but let's just forget that part for right now. But what do we do about it? What can we possibly do about the separation of classes in this country? It's something I have pushed for a long time. I will continue to push it. The end result is term limits for every level of the federal government. We have a president already. We do not have it for Congress. Or should I say every branch of government? Probably better. The executive branch, we have term limits. You cannot be president past 8 years. Done. Legislative branch, we do not have term limits. You can be a senator or a representative for as long as you're elected. Proof in the pudding of all the gray and silver hair people we have in Congress right now. The judicial branch, I don't know why I always struggle with that really back to back. The judicial branch, but say the first two really fast. Exactly. The judicial branch, there are no term limits. You're a Supreme Court justice until you die or retire. And so we need the judicial branch and the legislative branch to have term limits. The only way we get this done is to start with the legislative branch. The only way we possibly get this done is to stop electing the people, the incumbents, one by one by one. And we keep doing that until every single person who's in office passes legislation to enact term limits for the House of Representatives and the Senate. That'll get us the legislative branch. Now, the judicial branch is a lot harder because I believe, and I have to look this up to make sure, but I believe that can only come from the judicial branch. It may be able to be legislated, which that'd be easy. Make that part of the same caveat. You want to stay in office, you pass term limits for Congress, you pass term limits for Supreme Court justice. But that's the only way we stop this. Because as long as those who legislate can be continuously paid off and paid off and paid off, become multi-tens millionaires simply by writing and passing laws. Just think about that. Your job is simply to write and pass laws. But yet somehow you go from working in a shoe shine position or dishwashing position before you were a senator or a representative to suddenly you're making $15-20 million a year, or your net worth jumps up to $250 million in value. The only way that happens is getting paid off to do votes. And so the only way we get that to stop is to evict every incumbent. There's a Facebook page called Evict Every Incumbent. I suggest you go follow it. Evict every incumbent. It's the only way that we get term limits in Congress. It's the only way. What's in My Head is brought to you in part by Digga Movers, your safe and swift moving company. An A+ rated one-stop shop, licensed and insured moving company, providing local and long-distance services on the move. For more information, visit their website at www.diggamovers.com or call 1-888-77-DIGGA. That's 1-888-773-4436. The last thing that's on my mind is something pleasant. Of course, I try to do one of those at least. It's been a little negative, the last couple of episodes, 2 to 3. But we're going to try to get that ratio turned upside down. Turn that frown upside down. But last week, I took time and went to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to do some fellowshipping with one of my best friends in this whole world and a bunch of other guys as well. There were 2 groups of 8 of us down there. I didn't get a chance really to interact much with the other 8, but just timing, location, all that stuff. I did 7 rounds of golf in 4 days. 7 rounds of golf in 4 days. It's a lot. I needed a cracking and a massage today. I feel much better than I felt every day since I got back. But spent the week golfing, smoking cigars, having drinks, great conversation. And there's some gentlemen or brothers who were there who I did not know prior to that trip, who turned out to be millionaires. Millionaires, accumulated over time, short time, long time, different industries, different areas that they've created their wealth. And so I had the opportunity to have these life and wealth building conversations with millionaires for free. I mean, think about that. Think about the opportunity. I didn't know these gentlemen from can of paint, but they sat down with me, broke bread with me, even cooked for me, had a drink with them, played golf with them, smoked cigars with them, and he told me about the different ways that they became millionaires. And got a lot of information. And so that, other than the golf and other than the fellowshipping itself, that was the most enjoyable part. Getting some gems from people who were me 5, 10, 15 years ago. They're as I am right now because I'm not a millionaire. But they're me, 5, 10, 15 years ago in the position to start building their wealth. And I hope to be 5, 10, 15 years from now in their same position. But everything wasn't positive. And when I say everything, I don't mean like half of it wasn't positive. It was more so like 2%, 1.5%. Extremely, extremely positive, enjoyable trip. But I'm not going to go into specifics, but there was a situation that occurred with one person that was there. And I've always been someone that's made a point of being aware of the company I'm in the presence of. And so I look for all opportunities for networking. Anytime I'm in a room with people I don't know, I try to find out, observe, number one. The first thing I do is observe. But I try to find out who the people are, who might be someone in my industry, my area, my interests, who I actually have a conversation with, network with, get to know. I may become a resource for them. They may become a resource for me in the future. But you never know in a room or group of people who's watching you, watching how you operate, watching how you speak, watching how you communicate, watching how you network, watching how you are. And so the reason I'm that conscious in rooms that I'm unfamiliar with and with people I don't know is because sometimes climbing a ladder in life requires somebody to reach down and give you assistance. And how you carry yourself, your behavior can influence whether that hand reaches down or recoils. And there was an instance where one of the people that was in that group, multiple of these millionaires recoiled because of the way they carried themselves, they acted. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, we reach forks in the road. I talk about this all the time. There's forks in the road multiple days, multiple times a day, multiple times a week, multiple times a year. You never know. You never know when something you do or don't do may be the deciding factor on which side of the fork, in this instance, you go on. And I don't know if this was a fork in the road. It may be nothing at all for this person, but it could have been. And the way this person behaved might have ruined an opportunity to network with people. And I'm not saying one person. I'm saying like 4 people. There was one of the people who was there, one of the brothers who was there, who rang the bell on the stock exchange last week. I mean, it's one of those things where when you're in the room with people who are places that you could be in life, and it's not where I want to be, it's where I want to pass through, right? Because it's not about being the ceiling, it's about being a level. And so there's levels, multiple levels of where I want to be in life, and so that would just be one of the levels. But I'm not on that level right now, so I've got to get there. And so I've got to act accordingly, network appropriately, efficiently, and effectively. And so there are times when you come across people in life who don't operate the way that you do, and it's okay. A lot of times I attribute, now be it right or be it wrong, that their inability to function in multiple rooms with different people is a reflection of them wanting to be there but not necessarily knowing how to get there, or sometimes even jealousy about the people in that room being there on that level they want to be. And so while I was ironically totally unplanned thinking about this episode and thinking about what I want to talk about in this segment, a movie came on called Passengers. Lawrence Fishburne briefly appears in it. The guy from Avengers, and the movie's out right now. I can't think of it. Something 3. But he's a guy who is from Earth, and his father was a god. I can't think of his name right now. I'm really blanking on it, which sucks. Guardians of the Galaxy. He's Chris Pratt. And so there's a character, and I definitely won't remember her name, so I'm not going to try. But her character's name in the movie is Aurora Lane. And so hopefully I'm not ruining this because I hate ruining movies for people. But Chris Pratt's character woke her up out of cryostasis or sleep. They were like an 80-year journey to another planet and all this stuff. And so she found out eventually, hated him for a little bit. Ship started falling apart. He saved the day. They became great lovers again, and roll credits. But towards the end of the movie, there's a quote that she says at the end that I swear I was not planning this, didn't know this was going to happen, but it resonated so much with this situation and why I think this person acts the way they do. The quote is this: "You can't get so hung up on where you'd rather be that you forget to make the most of where you are." And I think that not only applies to the situation, I think it applies to the way that this person carries himself. That maybe they want to be somewhere else. They want to be what other people are, but they just aren't there yet. And I don't know this to be true, false. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. It's just a gut feeling that I had from the experience of being around this person for a couple of days. And especially once, other people came around and they're talking about this deal, that deal, this franchise, that franchise, things they're doing, trips are going on, all this stuff. And it seemed like success in golf against these people really manifested itself in disrespect. And that's all details I provide about it. But in the end, these guys are still going back to their second or third house and all that stuff. But you can't get hung up on where you'd rather be that you forget to make the most of where you are. And where we all were last week was in a place where we had an opportunity to network with people who have a different viewpoint on life because of the success that they accomplished. And so when you're in rooms and people you don't know, it's best to make the most of those opportunities because you never know if you'll get that chance again. But like I said, I hope that the fork in the road wasn't there, and I hope that he's still on the path to whatever success he wants in his life, and hopefully it's a lesson learned. I really hope so. But when we have the opportunity, you got to make the most of it, and that's what's in my head. So I've talked a bunch on this show, not too much, but a bunch on this show about two losses that I personally suffered last year as a result of cancer. The first in September of last year, my uncle who passed, I'm sorry, August of last year, who passed while I was actually on vacation, but after a long, hard fought battle with cancer. And then less than a month later, a very, very close friend of mine, if you're familiar with fraternity sorority life, my ADP. And so this was a culmination, if you will, of a long journey, especially with my uncle, who he really was the first time intimately I experienced end stage cancer. And so it was a very, very hard last few months for somebody who was so close to me, like a father. And then again, to lose my good friend Chaka, who actually appeared, as you remember, on my podcast less than a year before. And so I'm talking about this because business.com published an article in March of this year discussing bereavement benefits. Now, first of all, bereavement leave is also known as compassionate leave. It is a period of paid or unpaid time off an employee can take following the death of a family member or a close friend. Believe it or not, federally, there's no law that requires companies to offer bereavement to their employees, and most states don't require employees to offer bereavement leave. Now, California, Illinois, Maryland, Oregon, and Washington do have varying state guidelines. For instance, some specify family member, some specify immediate family member, and some provide bereavement for things like fertility loss, or fertility-related loss, I should say, or adoption-related loss. Now, personally, I've always struggled with the idea of family member, immediate family member, and how bereavement kind of changes for a parent versus, say, an uncle or aunt. The example that I'm talking about, my uncle that passed last year, who was like a father to me, some companies only give 1 day bereavement for uncles where they give a whole week for a parent. Now, if I worked for a company like that, I probably wouldn't take offense personally, but someone might take offense to that because their uncle was like their parent. That's a value they had to their life. And they would only get 1 day as opposed to an actual parent. Now, Mindy Castle, co-founder of the Children's Bereavement Center, answering the question of why businesses should provide bereavement leave, said, and I quote, "Companies and supervisors have an opportunity to influence the recovery of their employees by supporting them after a loss. I 100% believe this is true. But more than just influence, I think companies, businesses, organizations have an opportunity to show it's more than just business. It's more than just some law in their state. It's more than just some policy in a book, but it's more so that they actually care." Now, I am talking about this because I want to bring in my guest for this episode, Kim Hamer. She is the author of 100 Acts of Love, A Girlfriend's Guide to Loving Your Friend Through Cancer or Loss. She's an HR consultant and sought after public speaker who lives in Los Angeles. Coincidentally, I may be there later this year. After the death of her husband, Kim launched 100 Acts of Love, a consultancy that provides tools to help leaders increase team productivity, trust, and engagement when cancer affects the whole team member. So with that, welcome to Dave's Head. Kim, how's it going?
Thank you, Dave. It's nice to be here.
Very nice to be here. Before we started recording, I told you how hectic my day is, and you know, we've all got hectic days. So I'm very thankful for you taking the time out to step into Dave's Head. I did give a little intro of you, but as always, I like my guests to introduce themselves in their own words. So if you could take a moment, tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Sure. So first, I wanted to acknowledge that double loss. That's a 2022 is not a good year for you. And I know that you're still dealing with it because people think that, oh no, a couple months or maybe that year mark, you haven't hit the year mark yet. So I'm really sorry to hear about the deaths of your uncle and your good friend. So I started this journey completely by accident. I didn't set out to be this person who speaks on grief and death and cancer or loss. I was married for 14 years, and my husband, one athletic, tall, 6'6", 230, so good, solid, man, athletic, very smart. We ate organic. We kind of live in that pseudo California life that people think all Californians live. And one day he came in from a run, and he just was having trouble breathing. And he had been to the doctor about 4 weeks earlier, and we had been trying. He'd been running these really mild fevers, and so we were giving him. He was coughing, and so we were giving him, treating cancer at that point, which we didn't know, with ibuprofen and Delston cough syrup. It's not a cure. It didn't work. And so we ended up going to the doctor, and it was really interesting. I've never gone to a doctor's appointment. At that point, I'd gone to one doctor's appointment with him when it was a pre-surgery, a consultation. And so something about it just said, I said, I wanted to come with you, right? And he said, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that, because I want you to come with me. And it was just, he had some x-rays done, did an exam, and it was just like they do in the movies. The doctor came in and he laced his fingers together and put them on the table and said, I think it's cancer. And they couldn't confirm because they needed to do a biopsy, but the x-ray showed these spots all over his lungs, and the bottom half of his lungs pretty full. So we were kind of off and hit the ground running. Within a couple days, he was already really struggling breathing. He had to have surgery, and they couldn't even wait for the surgery to heal before they started on chemo, because it was stage 4. It was extremely aggressive, and it would have taken him out within 2 to 3 weeks. So that's how it all launched. And when we first started, everyone kept saying, if you need anything, let me know. If you need anything, let me know. If you need anything, let me know. And at first it felt really helpful because it was coming from all these different directions. We didn't realize, you don't realize what kind of community you're a part of until something like this happens, and people, you're parts of all these different communities, and they all come together to support you. But then after a few weeks of this, I realized it really wasn't helpful to say, if you need anything, let me know. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, about why and what to say instead. And then we noticed that some people were coming in and being really helpful and sort of taking charge, and other people weren't. So we kind of went through the cancer treatment. He beat the cancer the first time, and there was a celebration, but there was also a lot of oh my God, what just happened? Like, did you really almost die? And I think the thing that people can, when people hear the, no cancer diagnosis, there is a great amount of joy, but there's also a lot of trepidation, because you're not cancer free, right? You're going to have another test in 3 months. And you're going to have another test in 3 months after that, or whatever your doctor decides the testing rate will be. And there's this sort of cautiousness. And honestly, we had to look at our marriage. I mean, something like that brings out the best in your marriage, and it brings out the worst in your marriage. And we really struggled for a little bit. So we decided to stay married, which was good. We decided we liked each other, which was good. And we slowly started to kind of get, the test started getting farther and farther away. We started to kind of get our footing again and get kind of excited about what's next in our lives. And then less than 2 years later, the cancer came back, and it was stage 4 again, really aggressive, same kind of cancer. And then 4 months after that, my husband died. And so the same thing happened again. Some people knew exactly what to do and stepped in and were really, really helpful. People who I thought were going to be really helpful didn't. They backed away. Other people came in. And a couple of years later, I started to kind of think about this from an objective point of view. And I realized that most people don't know what to say or what to do, and it's not their fault. I went through a period where I was really resentful and angry, because I thought, my husband has cancer or he's dying, and you don't have the courage to step in. But it's hard to have the courage to step in when there's no guidelines, there's no rules, you don't know what to say or what to do. Like, it's almost like the Wild West in a way. And so I wrote a book. I sat down and wrote 17 minutes a day. And I wrote a book for everyone who has a friend or a family member or a colleague who is going through cancer or loss. Because there's, the joke is, it's not really a joke, but if 1 in 3 of us are going to get cancer, the other 2 need to know how to be supportive and helpful. And there's a lot of information out there on what it means to have cancer. And there's always more information, but there's so little information about how do you support someone through cancer or through grief. So that started there. And then I went back to work in HR. And what I saw in the outside world, in my world, when my husband had cancer and after he died, was the same thing I saw in the business world. Employees didn't know what to say or what to do. Managers didn't know how to focus their teams. They didn't know how to show empathy. And then when an employee died, they all relied on their EAP, which is an employee assistance program, which most organizations have attached because it comes with their benefits program. They rely on the EAP, and EAPs are equally ill-equipped. And mostly I focus on supporting managers who are dealing with a grieving team. Statistic-wise, I think it's just really fascinating. Statistic-wise, this new study came out and suggests that 69% of people say that their managers have more impact on their mental health than their therapist or friends. So I thought that was really interesting. And then another recent study it shows that turnover increases in the aftermath of a sudden or traumatic employee death. So there's two sides of this. It's a business, and businesses need to keep running. The other side of it is we are dealing with human beings in that business, and we need to be able to connect with them and to help them and to support them as they go through these challenges like death of a team member. So that's what I said. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm focusing on employee death. I'm talking to organizations about how to be supportive when there's a death, but I'm also focusing on training and coaching managers dealing with the loss of an employee and helping them have functional, productive, and compassionate teams.
Yeah. So two quick things. So I kind of see where the poll that said managers impact people's mental health more. It makes sense. You're spending 8 hours or a third of your day interacting, not consistently or constantly, but interacting with someone who's guiding how your work environment's going to be.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the whole phrase, a terrible manager can ruin a good employee.
Yep.
So that totally makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. But I'm curious, you said that you wrote for 17 minutes a day. What's the significance of 17?
No significance at all.
Okay.
It was that I wanted to write this book. I was terrified all the time. These negative voices and messaging were coming through all the time. And I just made a deal with myself that I would put all those negative voices on hold for 17 minutes. 15 minutes didn't seem long enough. 20 minutes felt too long. And so 17, I also have this thing for prime numbers. So 17 felt like the right amount of time. And sometimes I would write for more. Sometimes it would be longer because I was in the flow and I would just not want to be interrupted. But other times it was a struggle. I mean, I get to 10 minutes and think, oh my God, I've got another 7 minutes. This isn't going to work. Yeah. And so it was really a form of discipline for me to allow this creative piece, this thing that I felt so led to do, to come out and through and out of me.
Mm. Now, the prime thing, are you a Capricorn by chance?
I am not. I'm a Virgo.
Interesting. Okay, because that's such a Capricorn thing to say.
Yeah.
Because I'm big into prime numbers too. So listen, I'm a Capricorn through and through.
Yeah. That's
such a Capricorn
I am a Virgo. Yeah.
Okay. So in your intro, I intentionally left out the details because I wanted you to kind of talk through what your experience was. But can you talk really quickly about how your path? And you talked about personally and what you're doing now with companies, but as a result of this, and I'm assuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this was your first experience intimately with cancer.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah. and much like mine last year, how has your path changed? Because the few people I've talked to about cancer and dealing with it as an external person to cancer, like some of their loved one or something like that, it's changed them. And it's definitely changed me. So I'm curious how your path has changed after that experience.
I think the first thing is I'm much more compassionate. I am, and look, I'm not a fan of Trump. Don't like the man, don't want him around, et cetera, but I feel like I could have a conversation with him about his kids. Like I feel like that kind of compassion, that kind of I feel like I have something in common with everybody else in the world. It doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what color you are, what you look like. I feel like I could always be able to approach you on a human to human level and understand your path. I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when people think about compassion, they think doormat. So they think I'm really, really compassionate, and that means that anyone can do anything or say anything, and that's not what I'm saying. I just have a knack right now, an ability, or I was just learned. It's not a knack or an ability. I just learned to really look at people and look at their experiences from a compassionate point of view. It doesn't mean that I'm okay with you coming in and taking my computer. Like, no.
Yeah.
But so I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing, and this probably goes along with it, is I have much more gratitude in my life. I often say I was able to be there when my husband died, which was
Mm-hmm.
really, it was really meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like being there with him was his last greatest gift to me. Because being able to usher him out, to be able to witness that, to be able to say goodbye on that level, really put me in a very different space. Now, that
Mm-hmm.
space, I do want to be clear. Some people think that, like, it's like when you say you're cancer free, it's like, whoa, like the
Yeah.
world is beautiful and everything's great. Like,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, it took me years to get to that place of understanding, of feeling like it was a gift and feeling how lucky I was to be there with him, and, and and feeling like he trusted me with that moment, because he could have died when I went out to the bathroom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he could have died when I went down the stairs to get pizza. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think I think there's that, and I think I'm a lot more joyful. Honestly, there's a little bit. I think this is a combination of his death and also my age. Just as you get older, you just kind of, some
Mm-hmm.
things just don't matter as much.
Yeah.
And so I think there's that piece of it too. Like, I just kind of, I do this. Every Monday on my Instagram I do a dad joke. They're really bad,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they're really funny, and I
Okay.
crack up. And I asked my friend, I asked her to do something. I was doing the exercise for my business, and I said, "Tell me, what words do you use to describe me?" And she said, "Goofy." And at first I was like, "I'm not goofy. I don't want." But she goes, "Kim, your joke days are so bad. They're like so bad, but you keep putting them up because you
Yeah.
love them so much. And that's kind of goofy. You're kind of goofy that way."
Mm-hmm.
And so I think and that's an example of just kind of not caring. If it brings me
Yeah.
joy, I figure it'll bring somebody else joy, and that'll be a good thing. So I think that's really what I think. Those are the way that it's changed me. And patience. I have a lot more
Yeah.
patience than I had
Mm-hmm.
before.
Yeah. I'd say for me, and obviously I'm in the infantile stage of dealing with my situations. But I would say patience is definitely one of those things, except when I'm driving. But outside of driving, I've accumulated some, or I've gotten better at patience. Always, one of my sayings is time is our most precious commodity, and so I never found that more true or valuable than going through those last few months with my uncle, and then conversations, and the last time I saw my friend before he passed, and even speaking to him the day before he passed, less than 24 hours before he passed.
Yeah.
And so, I, on top of that, I will say this: I've never heard an analogy to compassion include Trump. Um, so that was clever.
and and you probably never will again. I don't think
Yeah,
anyone's gonna do that.
yeah. I mean that blew my mind, but I couldn't show it. But I was like, wow,
Right.
we actually just sat through an analogy for compassion that included the word Trump. But so I did talk about my experience, of course, and I received a lot of support professionally. I'm fortunate enough to work for a company where the person who manages me, I've worked with him through multiple companies for over almost 15 years, and so
Wow.
we know each other very, very well. And so I got all the support I needed. He knew what my uncle meant to me. He even knew what my friend meant to me. And so he gave me whatever time I needed. But how can leaders balance an employee's need for support with the team's need to get work done? And that's professionally, but personally, how can friends or family balance someone's need to mourn with the need for them to still live?
Yeah. So I think the hardest thing about grief is we all have ideas of what it should be until we've
Mm.
experienced it. So
Yeah.
we have our own preconceived notions that you should grieve for X amount of time. This is how you should show your grief, right? So there's certain ways
Mm-hmm.
you show your grief, and they're individual, right? So some people feel like nobody, you shouldn't be crying in the office. That's just not professional, and you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Other people are like, how are you sitting at your computer and functioning right now? I'd be like crying all the time. So
Yeah.
I think the first thing is to recognize our own preconceived ideas of what grief looks like. And even I, having been through a loss, or you having been through a loss, we have to be careful not to decide that everyone else's grief looks like our grief.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the first thing, is to really take a closer look. And I go through this. I do this section when I coach, and we talk about stereotypes and rules. And we all have the stereotypes of what it means to grieve, or what it means to have cancer, or all this other stuff. And we also have these rules in our head that are sometimes based on stereotypes, but sometimes random rules. In the
Mm-hmm.
Jewish tradition, you place the headstone at the year anniversary. It turns
Yeah.
out that that is something that, as a culture, we have taken in, and we expect people to be able to function and be fine and happy and dandy after the 1 year mark. After on day 366, you're supposed to turn it
Yeah.
around, and life is good, and get up out of your seat and just go, go, go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a fallacy. Some people it works for, most people it doesn't. Um, so I think it's really understanding, taking a closer look at our own beliefs is the very first thing as a manager. I think the other thing to understand as a manager is a team is there's often the fear of talking about grief on the team, because it
Mm.
feels so unyieldy, right? It's so
Yeah.
wild, it's so out of control. You can't fix it, you can't make it go away. And so it's something that managers don't want to discuss. But what I find in my work is that when managers start to discuss grief on the team, when they start to discuss hardship, the team actually comes together, and the manager ends up helping them process. Now,
Mm.
manager as therapist is never a good model.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I think that's sort of the way we're going, with the focus on well-being and mental health, and managers have to now take care of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's managers need to. So the first thing would be, managers need to take a look at their own stuff, but then they need to make it okay to grieve on the team. I
Mm-hmm.
educate the managers on what grief looks like. How does grief show up on a team? And there was this one great story this manager shared with me. He had this key employee who was a stakeholder on a couple other different teams, and an employee on their team died. And within a couple, this key stakeholder was, everyone loved him, he got along great with everyone, he was always very patient, always had never didn't speak a lot in meetings, but when he spoke, people listened because he made really good sense. He was able to hold the team together, made was very calming. The manager started to get reports back from other people that this guy was like over talking people, wasn't
Mm.
showing patience, was rolling his eyes in the meetings. And so the manager pulled him in to talk to him, and they found the same thing. Like, this previously patient, kind, thoughtful gentleman was like, whatever.
Mm.
And when we when I finally talked to him, I said, that's grief. And he
Yeah.
was like, dope, you know. So
Yeah. He's
grief
lashing out.
shows up. He was just impatient. When someone you care
Yeah.
about dies, you don't have patience for the small stuff,
Mm-mm.
right? So you're realizing that your coworker is now dead. You're thinking about your coworker's family, all the ramifications. You're missing your coworker, and then you
Mm-hmm.
go into a meeting, and they're talking about the widget that is, that everyone thinks should be 1/16, and you think should be, and it should be 1/8, but no one's listening to you, and this is just stupid because this widget is not gonna do. It's not gonna make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the perspective piece. So when an employee dies, usually one of the biggest signs of grief on a team is your team just loses all sorts of patience for other people and for other quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote silliness. Um, so I think managers need to understand the signs of how grief will show up on a team. One team member may just buckle down and just come in and work. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have previously been very social, or the other happens. They may get very social when they're the ones who previously buckled down and work, and it's because, for whatever reasons, work feels like it's just too hard to do. Spaciness is another example of grief. The person who normally remembers meetings and puts them on the calendar is going to start to forget. Errors occur. A lot of errors occur. And so managers will see this if they're not trained and not aware. Managers see those errors as performance issues, which they are, but they're performance issues because of grief.
Yeah.
So being able to have those conversations with people, look, one thing I know is I remember getting to the end of the first 30 days after Art died and feeling like, okay, I'm all right. I'm doing okay. And then getting to the end of 3 months, 90 days, and looking back at me at day 30 and being like, oh, you were not okay. Like, you were not okay. We often can't see grief in ourselves. So as a manager, part of their job is to reflect that back to them. And so instead of bringing him in and saying, what's going on? Why are there all these errors in this report? This is unlike you. I'm going to have to write you up. Is, hey, I think that I see this. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's your report before, Nancy died. And here's the report you wrote 3 weeks after Nancy died. And you can see all the errors. So I think this is grief showing up. I'm gonna ask you to pay extra close attention. Let's see what we can do to support you to make sure those errors aren't occurring in the reports anymore. Grammarly, whatever it is. You're gonna brainstorm with this person, and then together you're gonna work and make sure that this report shows up well. So you're having a performance conversation with the employee. But it's not one of these ones where like, you're not doing well and this is not okay. It's, hey, I think this is grief showing up. And once the employee knows that this is grief showing up, it gives the employee, first of all, a sense of relief. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Right. And then you've got a little bit more of a runway. You can really connect with that employee. You can help that employee do better. You can connect that employee with someone else who might be really good at spell checking or whatever it is right now, that can help them for the time being. So it's actually an opportunity to build employee engagement and build trust. But if managers are unaware of that as part of the process, then they're not going to know. And then they lose the trust of the employee. And then guess what? The employee's out in a year because they're sick of this. They don't think that the company really cares about what happened and isn't dealing with the ramifications and isn't human-centered. Who wants to work for a company that feels like it doesn't care?
Mm-hmm. So real quick, is the answer or the suggestion from the manager ever take some time off?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, absenteeism goes up after there's a death of an employee. So yes, I mean, there can be like, if this person is constantly like, you're noticing on week 3 that they are just falling apart and nothing is working, then you can say, hey, I want you to take some time off. And in this case, I would have the manager check with HR to make sure, see how much time that person has able to take off. If they don't have a lot of time, is there a way that they can finagle something? I really liked your introduction in bereavement because that's a really good point. A lot of companies, so Accenture just went to 30 days for partner and child. And then they went to a week for significant, for siblings, grandparents, aunts and uncles. And then for everyone else, it's like 3 days. So they have a graded kind of bereavement. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. Suggesting time off is really hard. And they may refuse because it may be work that's holding them together.
Yeah.
So that's the other piece.
Just to get out of the house, not be around the bed, the smell.
Exactly. So they may say, I'm not taking time off. I cannot take time off. I don't want it. They may really, really fight it. And in that case, you're going to have to come up with another solution. But that's where having someone to talk to discuss these options with is always very helpful.
Yeah, I had one more thing, but you just mentioned bereavement, so now I have 2 more things to follow with. So let's start with the bereavement. And I mentioned that I have this. It's not an issue, but it's a weird feeling about the sliding scale thing. Just because you never know the impact that somebody really had in someone's life, and there's no way to you start your employment, rank the people in your life so we know if they die. But how do you feel about the sliding scale? Do you think it should be flat? Do you think it should be based on the way it is now?
I think your discomfort is about trust. companies put these things in place because they are afraid that someone's going to take advantage of them.
Mm.
Right? So if you have a small company and there's a lot of trust, then
Mm-hmm.
someone's mother dying or someone's best friend dying or someone's uncle dying doesn't matter. You get 30 days. You get 30
Mm-hmm.
days, right? And it's not 30 days, it's really not enough, but you get 30 days. So it's about trust. And when you have these big organizations and, large companies, that trust isn't there. And
Mm-hmm.
so they have to figure out a way to do it. I'm not a fan of the sliding scale, but I'm also a fan of people being really honest. So if you go in and you say, my best friend just died and I need the 30 days because this man
Mm-hmm.
was in my life every single day for the last 25 years. I can't function without it.
Yeah.
I think that as long as a company is willing to let those go in those situations, like kind of, you come to them and you say, but the sliding scale is really tough. And you're right. It
Yeah.
ranks if it's a grandparent that raised you, that's your parent. If
Yeah.
it's an uncle that raised you, like you talked about, that was like a father, he's a parent. He's not an uncle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think, I get, so here, that's the HR answer. I just gave you the perfect
Mm-hmm.
HR answer,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is, I'm sorry, this is the rule. I get why they do it and we have to do
Mm-hmm.
it, but we want, I hope companies are willing to let people advocate for themselves and say, I took a week. It is not enough for me right now. I need another week.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing I would like companies to start doing is treat it like FMLA. So with
Mm-hmm.
Family Medical Leave Act, you don't have to you get 12 weeks if there's some rules around it, but you get 12 weeks. You don't have to take all those 12 weeks at once. Family Medical Leave Act could leave if you have to drop your mother off at cancer treatment center before you get to work. And so that means you're going to be half an hour late for work every day. You can use the Family Medical Leave Act for that half an hour. So I would like companies to say, for instance, like we gave the example of maybe you lost your partner and being home is horrific for you right now. So you really want to come into work. But maybe at month 3, you realize you just need some time. And so
Yeah.
being able to take 2 weeks in the first month and then 2 weeks on month 3, have it up for 6 months. So I can spread it out so that I can take that time, because the idea that I'm going to grieve, get everything tied down and done in 30 days and then return to work is equally as silly.
Yeah. And it's interesting that your response was trust, because what I did mention in that article was something they talked about, or a question they asked about whether employees should have to prove or provide proof of someone passing away. And from what I remember off the top of my head, what the article talked about is that thin line between, trusting your employee and kind of appearing inhumane to
Yeah.
ask or demand for proof. Um,
Yep.
so yeah,
And
because
what,
to see your
look,
example, if you have this 30-day thing for every single person that passes away in your life, you can abuse that easily. So I get that.
yes. Yeah. And look, if you have an employee whose grandmother died, grandfather died, uncle, cousin, and niece died all in the same year, that is suspect.
Yeah.
Honestly. That's
Yeah.
suspect. You just,
Or just really, really bad luck.
really, really bad luck. Either way, you can say at death number 3 in 4 months, hey, we get that this is a very difficult time. Is there a funeral that we should be sending flowers to, right? So there's a
Mm.
way to get in there and to not go, I need to see. I mean, I was asked at work one time, my aunt passed away and then a really good friend of mine passed away. So it was 1 week, my great aunt passed away, and then like 2 weeks later, a really good friend of mine. And I didn't realize at the time because I was really young, but my boss asked me for proof. And
Mm.
I brought it in because I was so happy to talk about them. I was like, and this person did this, and he was
Yeah.
really great, and he did, so, but that was his way of going, is this really happening? So I think there are tactful ways that you can ask for information. You can say what newspaper was their death notice printed in, or where is
Mm.
their death notice. The company would like to donate, right? If it's the 5th time that year, you can come out and say, look, either
Yeah.
you're having really bad luck, which we're really sorry, but we need to see some type of proof of relationship here, or
Yeah.
it seems, I mean, the other conversation is, it seems like you're not happy here,
Mm.
right? Because I'm just wondering, how happy are you here? Are you okay with the work? Do you like your boss? What's going on? Because if it's 5 deaths in 6 months and they're faking it, then there's something wrong with the manager employee relationship, or the manager
Yeah.
employer relationship. So what is it? So I think that there are ways that you can tactfully approach that. It's just that, look, we're not, I would love to say that HR is really good at wanting to take the time and and coaching managers to have
Mm.
these to have these intricate conversations, but because there is such a focus on getting work done and driving
Yeah.
and productivity, there isn't that ability to there isn't we just don't take the time to do it. We don't really
Mm.
care enough to have those kinds of conversations, and if we did have those conversations, we'd uncover so much more.
Yeah. So I did a pretty good job of holding on to all three. So here's a third follow from the
Oh,
answer way,
good.
way back
I'm
ago.
impressed.
Um, so I'm curious, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm curious. Is it worse in the workplace if it's a long, drawn out period until death of an employee, or if it's sudden? Like, someone's dealing with cancer, they've been dealing with it for a long time, and then you come in one day and they finally succumb to their cancer, or if it's something where Dave had a heart attack and, at home yesterday and he's gone.
So
Don't let
it's
that happen.
more
I don't need that.
it yeah, no, exactly. That's not you, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm not even different Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. So it's more shocking. I don't know if it's worse.
Mm.
Um, in the widow world, there are striations of widowhood. And it's
Mm.
sort of like revealing the secret, kind of like colorism.
Mm. Okay.
so so in the widow world, you will find widows who say, my husband died suddenly.
Mm.
And the implication is that the sudden death is worse than a cancer death.
Mm.
And they are right in some aspects. I mean, the person leaves that morning, gets hit by a car, has a heart attack, whatever, and then is just gone, it's disappeared. Whereas in my case, there was that slow kind of, at least I had a week of warning where we sort of knew, not even a week, but I had about a week when I sensed it. So I had 7 days to really kind of prepare with the idea that this man is leaving this earth, um, and is just going to be dead.
Mm.
So I would say this: anticipatory grief is a thing.
Mm.
And oftentimes for myself, I didn't realize I was in anticipatory grief until years after he died. And so I don't know if it's worse, but if you have a team, so I think it just depends on the situation. If you have a team and this person with cancer and they've been working up until 3 days before they die, which does happen,
Mm-hmm.
then that can be very difficult because they're on the scenes. If you have a person who has been on FMLA because they have cancer and everyone's sort of wondering what's going on and no one's really sure and it doesn't seem like he's coming back, and the one employee who's in touch with them is like, it's not going well,
Mm.
there is anticipatory grief. And I guess it doesn't feel as shocking. So I think I'll say that's a really tough question to answer.
Mm.
But for the workforce as a whole, I will go on the side of, yes, when an employee drops dead, has a car accident, is murdered, falls on a knife by accident, or all the different ways that people can die, it does feel sudden. Andrew Huberman did a great podcast on grief. And what happens with grief in our heads is, when you think about someone you care about, your partner, your child, whatever, you think about where they probably are right about now, and you think about how long it would take you to get there. So if I have a friend
Mm.
who's in China, I think about, okay, she's in China, I'd have to buy a ticket, I'd have to make this flight, but I know I can get to them, I know I can see them again, right? I know I can reach them by phone. Grief pulls that away. You can't get to them, you can't reach them, and your brain is trying to figure the relationship between you and this person, the time-space relationship between you and this person has completely changed. And your brain is trying to figure that out. And so that's what makes it really hard. So if you have a sudden death, your brain has this kind of jolt of, oh my God, I got to figure this out. It really feels really hard. Whereas anticipatory grief, I knew for a week that he was going to be leaving. I still had the same thing. I still had the same, like, wait, he's not here. Wait, I'm so confused. Wait, what do you mean he's dead? Like that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there was sort of a lead up to it. Does that answer your question? I kind of waffled on that one, but
No,
I'm going to stand solid in that sudden is harder.
no, I know some questions I ask are tough to answer. They're not black and white. I'm a very black and white person, but they're not very black
Right.
and white, not very yes and no, one and zero.
Right.
So, although I frustrate myself with those types of questions, but I knew there was
It's
no
a good
easy
question.
answer there. Yeah,
It's a good question.
yeah. Well, because I mean, my good friend, that was his situation. So and add COVID to it, we're now working remotely, and so going through his journey, he wasn't at work as much, and then he passed. Um, and then just locally in the news here, there's a school teacher that was killed recently, murdered recently. And
Okay.
so, her students all loved her. She wanted to be a principal, just from what I remember from the coverage. So those are two very different situations,
Yeah.
where I'm
Yeah.
sure, the coworkers are experiencing that very differently.
Yes, absolutely.
So, talking about if we unfortunately, and not come down, but are diagnosed with cancer someday, what are some of the steps towards getting support that we can take, both in the workplace and in your experience personally?
So I'm glad you asked that because I want to circle back to this. So
Mm-hmm.
people often say, if you need anything, let me know. And there are
Mm-hmm.
four reasons why it's actually one of the least helpful things you can say. One is the most important thing is people want to connect. And I often do this analogy. Imagine you're going to lunch with a friend and you've just got married, had a baby, gone on vacation, bought a house. Something fantastic has happened to you. And you're going to lunch with this set of friends. You know they all know. And throughout this whole hour and a half lunch, no one says anything to you. No one says, oh my God, congratulations. Like, how do you feel? You feel ignored. You feel
Yeah.
not like you don't matter. You feel pissed. Well, the same thing happens. That same feeling happens when something horrible is happening in our lives. We want people to witness it. We want people to look us in the eye and go, holy cow, that's crappy. Just really,
Mm-hmm.
really, really crappy. And so that phrase doesn't do that. It doesn't acknowledge it at all. It just kind of moves immediately into action. And action is good, but with a caveat. The second reason that phrase is not helpful is, what is anything? Like, honestly, what is anything? It's too big a word. And I know, so when I was talking to this guy on Friday, he was like, no, I meant anything. And I'm like, would you have come over and wiped his wife's butt if he needed? And he was like, yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then you could see him go. It was pride. He didn't want to let his
Mm-hmm.
face show, but he was like, no, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have done that. Right? So anything is too big. I had a toddler. Does that mean, when you said anything, does that mean you're willing to take your brand new, just cleaned BMW car up to preschool to pick up my vomiting toddler? Or did you mean that you were happy to drop off a bottle of wine and eggs? So anything
Yeah.
is too big for anyone to wrap their head around. The third reason it's not helpful is now you've put the pressure inadvertently on the person who needs the help to figure out what you meant by anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you when people were offering you support, but you don't know what you need, and you really don't know what you need until you need it. And so I would boil water and go to the cabinet to get pasta and realize I'm out of pasta. Like, I need pasta then. Or I would just be, I remember sitting and looking at the condolence notes, and I really needed someone to be there with me when I opened them. Right? So you don't know what you need until you need it. And at that moment, then you're shuffling through your head of all those people who said anything. And you can't
Mm-hmm.
remember who said anything. It's too many people because everyone says it. The last reason it's not helpful, and it's probably one of the main reasons, is because now you're asking someone who's in an extremely vulnerable state to ask for help. And we're not good at asking for help on a regular
At all.
basis. At
Mm-hmm.
all. At all. So now you've got them, they're in the situation. The window has become the floor. Everything is turned upside down. They don't know what they need until they need it at that very moment. They're grateful that you said anything because it means that you care about them, but they have no idea. And then let's say that they do figure out that one thing. Now you're asking them to have the courage to reach out to ask you to do something that you may not even really want to do. It's just not going to happen unless it's
Yeah.
like your bestest friend in the whole wide world and you can read each other's minds and you can call her up and go, I need you to come. I'm about to throw up. Can you come over and hold my hair? Right? That type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So I often tell people to do two things. One, take a big deep breath and acknowledge what's happening. Right. And that really is, it doesn't feel like it's a good word, a good phrase, but it's really powerful. It's, I'm so sorry this is happening. Like, I'm just so sorry this is happening. Another great phrase is, I don't even know what to say. Like that shock value of what they're going through is shocking you. That's really moving and touching. And then the second thing is you want to be very specific on the kind of help you offer. And people say, but I don't know what to do. And I say, you do. We all have things that we enjoy doing around the house or in our lives. Some people are really good mechanics. Some people are really like clean kitchens. Some people are good cleaners. Some people are great at Excel spreadsheets. Some people are really good at speaking, right? So we all have things that we have multiple things that we are good at that we don't even think that that we feel guilty for being paid for because we're so good, because it's just so easy to us. What's the big deal? That those things happen to be your helping superpower. Do not ask me to bring you a meal. I won't. I can't. I will never offer it. I get anxious just trying to figure out the timing of everything. I'm not that person. I am the person, however, if you are looking for that one specific food item, I will hunt it down and I will be at the grocery store at 5 a.m. to meet the truck to make sure I get that thing off the truck for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have our helping superpowers, and it doesn't have to be this big, huge thing. I think that's the other thing is we often think, well, if I grocery shop, I need to commit to grocery shopping for the next 6 months. No, you don't. You can literally call them up and go, I am heading to the grocery store. What 5 things are you almost out of right now? What are they? What brand? I'll pick them up, drop them off at your door. We're going to call it good. Right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
kind of help that's really easy because it's so specific. Everyone's almost out of 5 things, always. It's very specific. It's a drive by, so you're not going to stay and have conversation and ask how they are and get into their business. You're like, nope, just going to kind of do it. And it's so simple that it's most people say yes to it because it's easy to accept. So
Mm-hmm.
being the more specific you are, the better. Okay, so back to your question. What do you do if you're the one who has cancer? I think the first thing is to gather your small group of people. And that can be one person, that could be two people, that could be 5 people. And they're going to be the ones who are going to be sort of the protectors around you. One of the things I learned early on was to not be available to everybody because it's an energy suck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my husband was very clear. He was much better at saying no to people than I was.
Oh.
Um, so, you have to be really clear that you have a limited amount of energy. And even if you're sitting on your ass, having cancer in your brain takes up a huge amount of energy. Like what that does, you're thinking, wherever you're going, that's a lot of energy. So, gather your people who are going to sort of be the posse to protect you. And then you can have all the support go through them. So, what we did was one of my sisters set up lots of helping hands so that there was the meal train, right? But they set it up, they put it out there, and when there was anything that needed that someone wasn't sure about, they would call her and my other friend to take care of it. I would say, hey, I don't want this anymore, and then all of a sudden it would stop being delivered to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that those people are around you and surrounding you is really important. The other key thing is make sure you have that one friend who doesn't give, can I swear?
Sure, absolutely.
Who doesn't give a shit. Like you want that one friend who's going to roll their eyes, who's going to laugh, who's going to tell you to get off your ass, who's going to, you want that one friend in your circle who is not always going to be, oh, poor baby, what's going on? You want that friend who is going to make you crack up. So always make sure you have a friend with a
Mm-hmm.
good sense of humor. And I think also and this is hard, to take a step back, even if you have 3 or 4 people in your lives, only 3 or 4 people in your lives who are helping you, to just be grateful for those 3 or 4 people. You know what I mean? Like my whole purpose of what I do is to teach people how much they matter, that they really do matter. And, I'm not here because I was really strong or brave or got through my husband's death and cancer and death. I'm here because of all the little things that people did to support us while he had cancer and after he died that helped build a new foundation for me to be able to stand on.
Hmm.
And so I really want people to know those small little one-off things that you do really do matter. So it doesn't have to be this big kind of gesture. It can be one simple thing that you do once, and it makes a difference. It makes their lives a little bit easier, and that's really your only job. That's really your only job.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about how certain phrases like "let me know if I can do anything," for example, doesn't give the value that's needed for someone who's going through the cancer battle. And my good friend who passed, Chaka, he was my guest for season 2 finale of my podcast, and he talked about the annoying but not really annoying, but in this world, he's free to say it's annoying. Um, Thing that people do is constantly ask, "What do you need? What do you need? What do you need?"
Yeah.
And he said he prefer if you just let him reach out to you if you need something. Sure, feel free to check on me, all that stuff, but don't ask me what I need. I promise you, I will let you know.
Yep.
And I can't remember if it was that. So I do a segment towards the end of my podcast called my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love Now. And it was either
I
that
love
episode
that.
or it was the episode because I take a summer break in August, so I wasn't able to do a show the month of my uncle passed, but I was able to do a show the month that my good friend passed because that was September. And so it was either the episode that my friend Chaka was on, or it was the month that I came back from break when my uncle had passed and Chaka had just passed. So there was a website that I found um, tailored to cancer patients where literally it was kind of like a social media for cancer patients where you can go through their journey. They could blog, they could journal, they could even post, I need a ride to chemotherapy, I need groceries. And people who basically friended them in this social media app, or not social media app, this website, friends, family, or inner circle could
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, I have this, I got this, I'll
Yep.
do this. And that to me seems like a much better way to go about it. You don't have to keep reaching out. If they need something, they'll post it on the site and you can check it off and say, I got it.
Exactly.
Um, so one thing that popped in my head too was, so we talked about what is difficult or things that people say that may not carry as much weight or be needed as much. Um, but what's something, if you are diagnosed with cancer, what's something that you can do? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. What's something that you can do um, to let people know that you need something without asking, if that makes sense? And so you can say relationships. There are certain people in your life who will just know who will get you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but communication has to be hard for someone diagnosed with something that literally could cut their life short. And so
Mm-hmm.
for those who may experience this that don't really have that communication already, or they do, but in this moment they can't really get the word. They can't form the question. They can't make the ask. How do they go about getting the help that they need in that moment?
That's a really good question, and I'm hesitant to answer because I haven't had cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, from my outside perspective, I would say, you need to make a list. We can't, I think, and this is often where relationships go wrong, no matter what kind they are, is where there's an
Mm-hmm.
assumption of that someone knows and understands what the other one needs. And
Yeah.
that assumption always gets people into trouble. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it makes an ass out of you and me.
I was going to
Um,
say it, but you said it. So.
yeah. So I think, it is, I think if you're the person with cancer, it's really believing and understanding that even though you may not see it and recognize it, you have positively affected other people's lives and they do want to help and support you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then from the other side, it is, understanding that the person who is receiving the help, sometimes there's this thing called law of reciprocity, which is if I give to you, you are expected to give something of same or equal or higher value back to me. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's very gentle law. It's like it's it's sort of like the idea when you let someone in cut in front of you. you sort of
Mm.
expect them, if you're going down the hill and you let someone cut in front of you, you expect them to let this other person cut in front of them because
Yeah.
because I just let you go in front of me. But what we forget sometimes when we're the people who are dealing with this horrific experience is we feel like, like someone has to, like when we were receiving all the support, I at one point wanted to cut it off because I felt like it was too much. And what it really turned out to be was I didn't feel like I could possibly pay all these people back. And someone said to
Mm.
me, "You're not paying them back. They're paying you back."
Hmm.
And so I had to switch the way I thought about it, and it was a challenge. It didn't come like overnight. But so if you're the person with cancer, understanding that people want to help you for three reasons. One, because they like you and you've done something nice for them. You will probably never know what it is. You will probably never get them to write, "I like you because of this," but you just have to trust that. Two, people are paying someone else back. So they're paying it
Mm.
forward, right? So they're something else happened and maybe they're the ones with cancer. I cannot tell you how many people showed up at our door who had cancer at one point in time
Mm.
to help. So maybe they're the ones who had cancer and they're paying it forward. Three, they're living in amends for something that they didn't do with somebody else. So they let a friend die and they didn't tell the friend how much they love them. They let a friend die and they didn't, whatever it is, they now have the opportunity to live in amends, which means that they're going to help
Mm.
you, live a better life. So those are
Mm.
the three main reasons that people step in and help. And you just have to trust the process. I mean, you have to trust that you are good enough, that you have done enough. We all have those negative voices, and I think they're more powerful now than they ever have been. And you're just gonna it's not adjust, but it is tuning them down, turning it down a little bit, and then looking up and going, right, I do smile every single time I come into the office, and that's why the security guard is so concerned about me and wants to drop off flowers, right? Because you
Hmm.
say hello to security guard every morning. You don't think it's a big deal, but that security
But
guard
it
thinks
is.
it's a really big deal.
Yeah.
So just remembering the law of reciprocity and that you are on the receiving end of that law, not on the front end of that law.
Mm. The light that you shine sometimes come back.
Yep.
All right. So last question. Let's talk about your book, 100 Acts
Okay.
of Love: A Girlfriend's Guide to Loving Your Friend Through Cancer or Loss. And I noted, or I think I saw there were 100 what do you call lessons or things to do in the
Mm-hmm.
book. So talk about the book and what do you expect or hope not expect hope that readers will get from it. You better do this. No. What do you hope that readers
Exactly.
will get from it?
So the point of the book was to make supporting somebody that you care about easy,
Mm-hmm.
and simple. And when you open the book, I'll show you. When you open the book, it is designed for you to be able to pick it up, read what it says, and then go take that action. So, for instance, let's see, I'm gonna back up here. Here's act of love number 27, right? Say, "I'm sorry." We just talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the chapter of what not to say. Here's act of love number 89, pack lunches. This is in the chapter helping with kids. So the
Mm-hmm.
idea is these tips are really simple and easy, and I wanted to make it accessible for everybody. I wanted people to kind of be able to go, "Oh my god, my friend has cancer." Grab the book, open it up and go, "Oh, I can do a gas card. Done. I'll do the
Yeah.
gas card." So that people felt like they could take some immediate action, feel good about the action. And what I have heard is, what I keep hearing back from people is that when they take these actions, the person who is receiving it, they're like, "Thank you so much," because no one else is taking these actions. Everyone is saying, "If you need anything, let me know." Instead of saying, "I'm going to register your car for you," or "I'm going to go grab it and get
Mm-hmm.
gas," or "I'm going to pack lunches for the kids for the week." So just take these simple actions. The other purpose of the book is to be sort of as a creative jumping off point. There may not be a single tip in this book that might ring your bell, but I can guarantee you after you read 5 or 6 of them, you're going to be like, "Oh, wait, I could do this for them." And you'll come up with your
Mm-hmm.
very own thing that you can do for your person. So that's really the whole purpose of the book. I wanted it to be an easy read. I wanted people to be able to feel like they could take concrete action, and I wanted to show people how simple and easy the action is that they can take.
I like the fact that it feels like it empowers the person to actually help, as opposed
Yes.
to, like you said, let me know if there's anything I can do. Well, you're kind of sitting back and assuming that they actually come to you with something. You're sitting back
Right.
waiting to do something. and then you may ask them a different way. You need anything? You
Right,
ask them a
right,
different way.
right.
Where
Yep,
this actually
exactly.
gives you, this empowers you to come up with ideas and say, hey, I can do this even if they don't ask me to do it. So I like that.
Exactly. And you can even say, hey, I don't know how you feel about people driving your car, but next time your car is out of gas, let me know. That's that
Mm-hmm.
specific thing, right? And it sticks in their head because it's so specific. So they
Mm-hmm.
realize they're out of car, and then we're like, oh, let me call Dave. Dave said he would do the. Oh, I feel kind of stupid, but he did offer,
Mm-hmm.
and he actually offered more than once. So he must really mean it. So let me call him and see if he can come by and put gas in the car tonight, right? So when you're really specific about the kind of thing that you're willing to offer, it gives the person who is receiving the help a break. Like, it gives their brain a break, because when you offer it and you offer more than once, they know you really mean it. And so
Yeah.
you actually end up kind of supporting them. Even if that person never takes you up on it, they feel like there's a piece of foundation underneath them that wasn't there before.
Mm-hmm. And there's something specific that if they happen to have that need, they know where it came from, as opposed to
Exactly.
anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
Gotcha. All right, Kim. So that's the end of the Q&A segment, and now what I'm gonna turn to is my favorite segment, my guest called First Thoughts. But first,
Okay.
First Thoughts is brought to you in part by SRE Solutions, simple solutions for complex problems. For over 15 years, SRE Solution has provided today's solution for tomorrow's problem. SRE Solutions will provide you effective, efficient, robust, and reliable business intelligence, application and website design, and PC support services. For more information, check out their website at www.sresolutions.org. Now, the way First Thoughts works is I provide my guests with a word or a phrase, and the idea is what's your first thought. They're not privy
Okay.
to this. They're not privy to this at all because that kind of would ruin the whole first thought thing. Uh, so, Kim, are you ready for First Thoughts?
I think so. I get
All right.
nervous with these things because I'm always
Not
thinking my
that
thought
bad.
process is a little bit off. Okay, go ahead, go
Eh,
for it.
we're all a little weird, so it's okay.
Yeah, this is true.
So, I like to start out with softball ones, but I feel like this is very pertinent, not very softball, so we'll see. The first thought I have is cancer research. What's your first thought?
Good needs to be more, and we need to be more patient. Cancer is
Okay.
complicated,
Mm-hmm.
complicated. It's not a one size fits all.
Okay. Next first thought, and we kind of touched on this when you did the Trump analogy, but empathy. What's your first thought?
We need more of it. It's really hard to do. It is not a shine. It is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and courage.
Okay. And last
Should I
first
be
thought.
answering longer?
You can, and I actually usually say this after the first one, and I completely forgot, but feel free to elaborate as much or as little as you want. So if you want to continue that one, feel free.
Yeah, so empathy is one of those emotions that we all hear about. Most of us know what it means, but few people practice it.
Mm,
And it's it is a hard emotion or trait to practice, because it means that you need to really put yourself in the other person's shoes, which
mm-hmm.
means you need to let go of your own views. And we have our views entrenched in us, and in it they are. We do not want to let them go because we feel like we're letting go of our person, of who we
Mm-hmm.
think we are. And so that's why I talked about empathy and Trump, right? I mean, I'm not a fan, 100% not a fan. But if I can let go of who, if I'm okay with letting go of who I think I am for that moment, then I can have a conversation with him. I don't know how that
Mm-hmm.
conversation is going to go, but I can be open to hearing what he has to say. And I also think that it's empathy is also understanding that just because someone has a view that is not like my own, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just that it's not like my own. It may ruffle me, may make me feel really uncomfortable, but it's not a bad opinion. And I think the other thing about
Mm-hmm.
empathy is also understanding that feelings come and go. They're not always the truth, right? And they don't stay. So I think kind of understanding that as well. So there's my little pitch on empathy.
Gotcha. And to add to that, I think the more counter experiences we have to the one that we're either discussing or trying to be empathetic to, the harder it is to be empathetic to that. So if somebody ran uphill, they're running a marathon uphill and they trip and fall, but we've done this 100 times and never stumbled at all. It's harder for us to be empathetic to them because we're like, why didn't they just run up the hill? What's wrong with you?
Yes,
It's a
exactly.
really bad analogy, but I think the audience
No,
gets what I mean.
I think it's, and we can take that because come to learn that they had, massive foot surgery and this race in last year, and this race was their comeback race, and it's really important to them. And then, then they fell. That turns the fall
Hmm.
into a whole different thing than just falling.
Yeah, yeah, very true, very true. All right, so last first thought, and I talked about this and my saying about it earlier. So time. What's your first thought if I say time?
Guilt. I
Hmm.
think there is a lot of guilt around not using the time, not having enough time, not using it well, not focusing your time, not taking the time, um, feeling this pressure around time. And I agree with you. It is the one thing you can't get back.
Hmm.
Um, and so it is precious, but at the same time, if you focus, you end up squeezing it so hard that you get nothing out of it.
Hmm.
So I think there's a balance, and I think there's a lot of patience in it because sometimes I use time really well and sometimes I don't. And those
Yeah.
times I don't want to carry the guilt from the times I don't, because then it ruins, it gets, and then it decreases the time that I use time well. I don't know if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
No, it does, and I've never thought about the idea of squeezing it so or finding it so precious that you don't get enough of because you're so focused on I don't want to waste it. I don't want to waste it. I don't want to waste it. So that's yeah. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
You don't get to experience the now because you're so worried about not losing what you haven't even experienced yet.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, didn't think of it that way.
All right, more thought for next podcast on Dave's head. Time.
There you go.
Looking at it
There you go.
differently.
So a little bonus this season. I started something new. A good friend of mine. We call each other TO. I started something called TO First Thoughts. And so what it does, it gives the opportunity for my guests to throw one back at me. First
Mm.
thought. So whatever we've talked about or anything, any topic at all, what's your first thought for me?
Why did you start a podcast?
So that's easy. So I started my podcast during the pandemic because there was so much fear, so much confusion, so much bad, just blatantly bad information out there that I wanted an opportunity. And I've done broadcasting, radio DJ, all this stuff back in college. So I was not afraid of the mic or any of that stuff. But I wanted an opportunity for people that I knew and different expertise to have a voice and to kind of give factual information or guidance to people who were just struggling. I mean, there were a lot of people I knew that were struggling. They were showing it on social media. They were showing it in text messages and phone calls. The very first episode that I did my podcast on was about financial literacy, financial planning, because that was a huge thing that was going on when COVID first started because people were losing jobs. People were realizing their savings were being swallowed up, cashing in 401ks, doing all these things, and not really putting themselves in position that once COVID was over to be financially sound. And so that was the first episode that I did was about financial planning. And so just kind of took off from there. But the genesis for why I even wanted to start it was I was frustrated with so much misinformation out there, and I just wanted to have a venue or an avenue for people to hear factual information, especially about COVID and its treatment. But it just happened to start with financial planning. So yeah, that was it.
All right, it's a good answer. I like it.
Cool.
Not that you could have a bad answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, unless it's some really crazy selfish way that I wanted to start a
Right.
podcast. But Kim, speaking of time, I do want to thank you for taking the time to step into Dave's head. As always, before I let you go, I like to invite my guests to speak on anything. If you want to promote anything or talk about anything, feel free to do so now.
Sure. So on my website, if you'd like to know what 4 other phrases never to say to anybody dealing with cancer or loss, check out my website at 100actsoflove.com. That's the number 100. So it's 100actsoflove.com/what not to say. Very simple, no spaces, no capitals, what not to say. And you can download your 5 free phrases of what not to say, why not to say them, and what to say instead. So you get a little bit of an education on what kind of makes a bad phrase. I'm, of course, if you're interested, I'm on LinkedIn. Would love to speak to you if you are experiencing loss of an employee within the last 30 days. Let's have a conversation because I can definitely, I would love to come in and support your team and support your manager as they manage a grieving team. So yeah, check me out at 100 Acts of Love. I also keep a blog there. I share personal stuff as well as business stuff, and you can also check me out at 100 Acts of Love on Instagram.
All right, thank you. And very curious, it just popped in my head. Might be a new segment. Who
Yeah,
knows? Give the people one fun fact about yourself.
I rode my bike cross country from New Jersey all the way to San Francisco. So for those of you who are listening, I'm African American, and I rode my bike across country with a white Jewish boy, and we didn't die, and no one killed us, and no one came after us, and people let us into their homes. It was an amazing trip. But yeah, I actually pedaled a bicycle all the way across the country.
That was going to be my follow up. Are you talking about motorcycle or pedal bike?
No, pedal bike. By panniers, we had our bikes had the panniers on the front and the back. We had the sleeping bags, we had the tents, we had the cook gear. Yeah. Thinking about it now, it's crazy, but this was a long time ago.
That's well. I'm thinking strength and endurance, and I'm thinking weather conditions,
Yeah.
and all types of things.
Yep.
I'm thinking hazard of roadways. I mean,
Yep.
you're not on the interstate, but you're probably on back roads,
Yep.
2-lane roads, and
Yep.
wow.
Yep. Yeah. Like I think about it now, and I think I'm
respect
surprised
to
my
you.
parents. Well, I'm surprised my parents didn't try to like lock me up and throw away the key, because if
Just
one
curious,
of my kids came to me, go ahead.
Just curious, how long did that take?
It took us 3 months, and we took our time. We took our time. Like we met people who made the trip in 6 weeks.
I think both of those seem way too short for me, but okay.
Yeah,
So it
there's a
reminds me
random
there's some Amtrak train that you could pay, I don't know, $60-$70 that'll actually get you from all the way across the country. It reminds me of that, but I imagine you maybe looked up landmarks and your path that you planned and all that stuff, and just stopped here and saw this rock and saw this big cotton candy ball and
pretty much
all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, basically, we just decided we were going to take a northern route. So we started in New Jersey. So we stayed north. We went into Pennsylvania, Ohio. First of all, it's the first time I really understood the geography of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And then went into Chicago, went absolutely through Illinois. I believe we dropped into Kansas, came across Nebraska, Colorado, and then we went north in Colorado, through Idaho, into Oregon, and then hit the coast and went down the coast. So yeah, we just that was the only thing. We just knew we didn't want to go south. You didn't want a black girl and a Jewish boy and a bike in the south, even back then.
I was thinking
even back then, we weren't going to go through Atlanta or, Atlanta would have been fine. We weren't going to go through Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So we figured traveling north was safe, and it was great. We got
parts
to see
of
some
Texas,
friends. Yeah, parts of Texas, exactly. We got to see some friends. And also, it's hot and arid and flat, and this is, the northern part of the country has much more green. So yeah.
I just keep coming back to a pedal bike. It's just a pedal bike.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Well, respect to you and kudos to you for surviving and having that story to tell randomly when I ask you on my podcast. Cause
yeah, no, I'm just looking back and thinking, it's just a crazy trip, but it's what we did.
Yeah, I got nothing. I don't even know what to say to that. I got nothing. Kim, I do want to thank you again for stepping to Dave's head, and I look forward to actually going to your website and looking at that list of 5 things not to say. I think it's important to not only be supportive, but to be supportive in the right way. From my experiences, I didn't think about this until last year, and now it's something that I want to make sure I get right, whether it's me or somebody else going forward. So definitely thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate you. And thank you for sharing your story. And again, I'm so sorry. It's 2 tough losses. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. But I'm going through, the phases that you went through. I had my moments. I think last night was one of those moments, actually. But, I had my random moments here and there. And then, I find myself thankful that I got to experience them.
Yep. Amen.
So, yeah. All right. Well, you take care of yourself. And again, thank you for stepping in Dave's head. My favorite segment of my podcast is my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. This time of the year is exciting as you see prom fits and pomp and circumstance and parties and all these things as they get more and more and more creative. Somebody got a horse and something for their graduate senior prom person last year. I think it was last year. I think she also ran into something with the IRS too, but whatever, who cares? These things, the prom fits and the prom circumstance, the parties, extravaganza, all these things get bigger and bigger and bigger and more creative every year. But my favorite are the relief, even if it's temporary, of students graduating from high school, but specifically college. And the reason I say it's albeit temporary is because when you graduate from college, you're euphoria graduating, yay! And then Uncle Student Loan and Auntie Bill come knocking on your door a couple months later. But there's still excitement nonetheless. I mean, it's rightfully so. Whether you went to college for 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 years, whatever, graduating is a big deal. You should be celebrated. You should be happy. It should be ecstatic. But understand that Uncle Student Loan and Auntie Bill's gonna come calling. And so I thought about graduation time, right? And some of the things we used to do back in the day for graduates, throw them a party, take them to Spaghetti Warehouse. For those of y'all from Philly or Northeast, I think Spaghetti Warehouse is only in the Northeast. That was the thing back in the day, going to Spaghetti Warehouse. Yeah. That was the last time I was there at my high school graduation. Haven't been since. But we do different things for our graduates. And a lot of those things are temporary, right? They're temporary in the sense that they're celebrating today. They're celebrating the work that you have done. They're celebrating finito, all those things. They're celebrating the finalization of that phase of your life. But a lot of time, the gifts that are given aren't there to celebrate set up things for the future. And so I went to Mass Mutual. Mass Mutual is a mutual life insurance and financial services company. Went to their website, and they had posted a blog about a month ago, so it's rather recent. The title of the blog entry was More Than Money, 7 Financial Gift Ideas for the College Graduate. And it was written by Amy Fontanelle. I'm hoping I'm getting the name right. Usually I don't. More Than Money, 7 Financial Gift Ideas for the College Graduate. And I want to talk about the 7 really quickly because I think they're important. I think when you look at those 7, they're actually really, really great ideas and things that you can do for the college graduate that's in your life or that you care about or want to help them have a better future than you did when you graduated from college. The first is Roth IRA contribution. And she talks about the fact that you can help a graduate by helping them fund their retirement savings early. I know when I came out of college, and I came home from college after 3 years, I did not graduate from the original college I went to because I had a job offer I couldn't refuse after 3 years. The last thing I was thinking of was saving for retirement at 21, 22 years old. And so if you have the means, the max you can contribute is $6,500 a year. An amazing gift. Imagine if you presented a letter to your graduate and said, I put $6,500 into a Roth IRA for you to start building for your retirement right now. Now, in today's world, a graduate probably has a job lined up. Good chance they do. Back in the day, back in the 90s, early 2000s, it wasn't guaranteed that when you graduated from college, you were starting a job within a week, 2 weeks, a month. And so a great way to start building that retirement is to get started day one. That $6,500 may become $15,000, $20,000, whatever. Who knows how much over the span of 20, 30, 40 years. But it starts at $6,500, and it also opens an account for them so that they can then add things to that account on their own. They get the itch maybe to start building, throwing a little $100 in here, $200, max $6,500. It might be something they want to do. The second thing they talk about, which I think is really cool, which if you have less means, I think actually works perfectly, is make their student loan payment. Make 1 or 2 or 3. If their student loan payments 1, 2, or 3 come to $6,500, there's some really bad interest that they signed up for. But assuming it does, and assuming it won't be that much, say their student loan payment is say $1,500. Say they have a $500 payment, which may or may not be the case when they first graduate, because a lot of times there's a grace period after graduation of 6 months, a year, depending on the loan that you sign. But interest still might accrue. And so what you could do is make interest only payments until they get a job, or make interest only payments for 6 months. Or just make a payment that includes the principal and interest to get it down so that when they do start collecting a salary and have their job lined up and start looking for a house and all these different things, that they don't have to worry about their student loan payments for X amount of time. That's something that you can do as well. And it's definitely should be cheaper than a Roth IRA contribution if you max it out. Another thing I think is really good, really good idea, and something that I know I didn't think of at 21, 22, was getting a life or disability insurance policy. Another thing you can do is get your graduate a policy. The younger that you are, the younger the premium is going to be. It's just the way it works. Now, you can get them a very high value policy. You can get a term policy for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever, depending on the insurance provider or writer. But getting something really low, and maybe you pay it the premium, for the first 6 months or a year and a half, especially if it's a term policy, you're probably get something that's pretty low. Pay for a year. Again, it's going to be less than $6,500. So if you don't want to max out a Roth IRA, you have, say, an extra $500,000, may want to throw it away, pay $1,000 worth of premiums, whether it's 7 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, 15 months, depending on the price. But youngins, and I'm saying youngins because everybody's young to me now that I'm in my 40s, but youngins don't think about life insurance and disability. And so maybe get both, because, they're out there still playing football and running around and tackling with their fraternity brothers, or drinking with the sorority sisters, or whatever they're still doing at their young age, happy houring it up after work. You never know what can happen. And so not only does the life insurance protect them, any debt that they may have accumulated, because remember, just because you pass away, your debt becomes responsibility of someone else if you don't have life insurance, you don't have wills and all that stuff to manage what happens to that debt. And so protects them, protects you, especially as a parent, because I believe in many states, if not all, the debt of the child, if not no life insurance, falls to the parent. Somebody correct me, feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Same thing with disability. Freak accident, you never know. We all think we're young. We all think we're invincible. So that's a great idea. Life insurance or disability insurance policy. The next thing you do is do a seed investment in a mutual fund. And one of the things that she writes about, and she being Amy, is that you might want to reinforce the idea that this investment is long term. And so she talks about it can grow over decades. And so again, looking to the future, don't want to just give you something now for temporary. Don't want to just give you some money now, just say congratulations, but build something for the future for you. Which goes to the next one, which is just absolutely amazing. It's probably my favorite one of the 7. Actually, it's my second favorite one. But a personal finance book. And it's more so the reason why she says this instead of what it is. And so she talks about the fact that young adults might not listen to the adults in their lives when they're graduating from college, but they might read a book. They may trust, and I'm using quotes, trust a book over the advice of their parents or advisors or mentors. It's not a negative slight towards any of those 3 that I just mentioned. It's just a natural occurrence that some youth are cocky. They just graduated from college for 4, 5, or 10 years, however many. They got multiple degrees or 1 degree that they really worked hard for. They think they kind of know everything a little bit. But they might listen or read a book and listen to the advice in that book. So I think that's a good idea. She gives several examples of books that were great for finance advice. The next last one is a certificate of deposit or a U.S. savings bond. Now, with a CD, you have to be a little careful because there are tax liability implications with a CD. Depending on the growth, you have to pay tax on that type of stuff. Consult your financial planner. Don't take my word for it. Consult someone other than me. Now, with a bond, the cool thing about that is the interest income and principal growth are not taxable on a state or local level. So a bond, you can sit out there. It kind of, I believe bonds grow with the economy. They're economy proof, I think is what the term is. Again, research, consult a financial planner. Don't take my word for it, but it's a great investment. A CD, so you have 6 month CD, year CD, 9 month CD, you have 1 month CD. Whatever length you think will best benefit your graduate, get them that CD or get them a bond that sits out there that's economy proof. Maybe have a little emergency money later down the line. The last one is my favorite because I think it allows the graduate to network and get information for their net worth. And so that's a meeting with a financial professional. Why is this important? Because the right financial planner will set you up based on your circumstance, your individual circumstance. They will plan your finances. They will plan your debt reduction. They will plan your future savings. They will plan your future growth, and they will plan your retirement. The right person as a financial professional in your life will set you up for success on so many levels and for such a long period of time. And it's an opportunity to network because financial professionals know financial professionals. They know wealth builders. They know a lot of people. And so if you get in contact or network with the correct one, again, the correct one, not all financial professionals have your best interest in heart. Even if they say they're a fiduciary company, they can still work their way around it. But they can impart important information such as emergency funds, retirement savings, fundamentals of sound planning, all those things. And so I think that's my favorite one because one, it puts the onus on the graduate to take charge of their future. The financial planner could look up and say, any of the 6 things besides that one I mentioned, go that route and do that on your own. And the graduate can say, cool, I'll take that advice. They could say, open up a Roth IRA. They can say, pay down your student loan faster. They can say, get yourself a life and disability policy, which I promise you, a financial planner will probably say that. They can say, invest in a mutual fund. They can say, here's a couple personal finance books that I want you to read so that you understand what I'm saying. You can apply that based on some of the information in these books. They can say, open up a CD or a bond. They can say any of those 6 things, but it's someone dedicated to your personal, unique situation, knowing your employment, knowing what your plans are, your goals are, how do you want to retire, what age you want to retire, where you want to retire, what circumstances you want to retire in, all these things. So my advice, my best gift, I think, would be setting up and paying for financial professional assistance for a graduate. Pay for a year of that. Pay for 2 years of it. But make sure it's a good, sound, legit financial planner that you hire or you get hired for your graduate, and just pay for a year of it. Pay for 2 years of it. Do that. I think all 7 are really good. Like I said, the financial planner one is absolutely my favorite because it just makes sense that all the other things around financial planning and around financial success can be learned from that financial planner, influenced by that financial planner, and executed by the empowered graduate. They're not just given something saying, I did this. They're actually wanting to do it themselves. I want to thank Kim Hamer for stepping into Dave's head and really being vulnerable, opening up about her story with her husband's unfortunate cancer battle and losing his life to cancer. I think that one of the eye-opening things for me was the idea of not saying to someone, let me know if there's anything I can do. I promise you that's probably something I've said 100 times, at least. And now I'm having a different perspective on that phrase and understanding the onus that puts on someone to provide that anything to you and to reach out with that anything. It's a different viewpoint I have now. Very much a different viewpoint. Check out our website at www.100actsoflove, 100 being the number, everything else being words, 100actsoflove.com. And you can check out her free download. I encourage you to download this. 5 phrases you should never say to anyone with cancer. If you've ever lost anyone to cancer, if you know anyone, loved one, friend, confidant, acquaintance who's battling cancer, I think it's important that we know how to help. And so please download this free guide. There's a reason she made this specific thing free. She's been through it. And she understands. 5 phrases you should never say to anyone with cancer. You can check it out on her website. You can find her on Instagram at 100 Acts of Love, Facebook as well, 100 Acts of Love, and LinkedIn, Kim Hamer, PHR. Check out her book, 100 Acts of Love, A Girlfriend's Guide to Loving Your Friend Through Cancer or Loss. You can get that from her website in a soft book or ebook format. Support our sponsors, Digga Movers, for all your safe and swift local and long distance moving needs. Check out their website at www.diggamovers.com. And SRE Solutions for all your PC support, antivirus removal, website development, network, both wireless and wired, office runs, and so much more. Check them out at www.sresolutions.org. And if you're interested in sponsoring on Dave's Head, reach out to me on any of my social media, and we can definitely make this happen. So fellowshipping, acts of love, and graduate gifts. All great reasons to be in love with now. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. New episodes released on the second and fourth Friday of the month. For all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Subscribe to watch new episodes on YouTube or Spotify video, or to listen via your preferred podcast player, go to anchor.fm/Dave's Head Pod. Thank you for watching or listening. As always, enjoy life, because life should be fun. Take care.